Square Enix have had an absolutely bizarre time, something that people will no doubt also be thinking about now that we've seen the bizarre Forspoken trailer that is currently being absolutely roasted online for its highly embarrassing dialogue. But overall, the thing with Square Enix is that while they have had, as much as FF14 has been going from strength to strength, a very bizarre year and a half. And they've made some very interesting business decisions that essentially show them maybe trying to work out what their purpose is.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of seeing this across the spectrum of publishers. We're seeing, like, them almost find their own voice when they kind of mature a little bit. You've got EA being this kind of grifter that's kind of finally working stuff out. You've got Ubisoft being in a midlife crisis. So I'm trying to think of these as, like, if they were people, to me, Square Enix is the almost like the kid that was running away from, like, the family business. That was like, no, I'm going to go try out this cool stuff over in America. I'm going to try all this cool stuff out in Europe. It's going to be really fun. I'm going to travel and find myself. But they're never quite finding success. And then they got home, they're like, fine, I actually like it here. Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be the whole time. Yeah. Because now they're just like, where's our successes? They're at home. Where should we just maybe accept that finally and make games for the people who are like, you know, almost in the way, you know, you see a hero in a movie, like, disregard their friends for more power or something, and then they come back and go, no, the power of friendship was there all along. Square Enix are like, oh no, the power was with our existing audience the whole time. Shit. Yeah. Shame we didn't know that so 10 years ago.
If that seems like a completely insane thing, don't worry, there are actually material business moves that are being made that do actually reflect that. And to recap some of the bizarreness of the time that they've had, right, well, there's weird things like The World Ends With You and Kingdom Hearts just, you know, on PC only being an epic. That felt a bit weird. Some strange experiments, Voice of Cards and Dungeon Encounters. There's the Life is Strange remasters, which were pretty damn messy. There's the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters and ports, which I think started off well and then got a little bit more controversial. Then we've got Babylon's Fall.
Yeah, it's
a sheer disaster. We've got the whole monetization bizarreness of Chocobo GP, which also is bizarre. And then, as much as I think we both dearly love it, we do have the utter enigma that is Stranger of Paradise. And then also, generally, them in the West being weird.
Yeah, it's like you look at Babylon's Fall, it's almost hard to remember that that's Square Enix, because they have such a decent amount of goodwill at the minute, and people are so excited for the FF franchise. Then you go, oh yeah, they did Babylon's Fall. Why did they do that? Why did they think it was a good idea? Why did they throw a load of microtransactions and shit into Chocobo GP? And you can tell, like, that's like them mimicking that's what a lot of publishers are trying to do with, like, we'll squeeze money out. We'll find the golden goose that we can, you know, foie gras, Activision style. We'll find something to absolutely destroy it. And I have the feeling that they maybe tried that with Stranger of Paradise initially, and then they realized it wasn't going to work, because the end game of that game is just like infinitely scaling chaos mode with like this gear loop that works really well in the single player context, and it's like a full, you buy the game, you get access to it all. But when playing it, I'm just sitting thinking, there's a real cynical, because obviously when you do this, you end up very cynical about publishers a lot of the time. I'm thinking, they definitely at some point had this down as a live service. They definitely had this full of microtransactions at some point. It's either that or Team Ninja or just bonkers. Because I've not played the Neo games. Maybe there's a little bit of that kind of DNA still there. But it's full on. This looks like almost the way Outriders looks. Where you look at Outriders and go, this is clearly designed to be a live service. It's not. People confuse it for one when they've said it's not. It's hard because it sort of is a little bit. But it looks like, oh yeah, if this game exactly as it was came out from, say, an EA or an Activision or Ubisoft, you would imagine all of those things would slot in perfectly. All the microtransactions, the XP boosts, the, you know, battle passes, they would all slot in perfectly to this design. So I'm just like, yeah, we're in the tail end of them kind of going, maybe we should just release games that people buy and then not fuck with them after the fact, because that's where everything goes wrong for them.
So to go to the strengths, though, right? So we've got Live Alive, it on Switch is near universal praise. Forspoken, right? Big new thing. Obviously, being laughed at right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And it is still just pinballing around in terms of, when it's actually going to come out. But when you actually look at the next while, they have very, very, much demanded remakes and ports, really big, strong franchise games, a few small-scale experiments as well. So, to go through, right, Diofield Chronicle, we've got Valkyrie Elysium PS4, PS5 with a later release on PC. There's Nier Automata going over to Switch. We've got Harvestella, which is basically a Rune Factory-like game. Tactics Ogre Reborn, which I think could be quite big. Dragon Quest Treasures on Switch. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis for phones. Star Ocean The Divine Force on basically the consoles this year. Forspoken. Final Fantasy 16. And then, of course, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which we imagine is also going to be pretty damn humongous.
Yeah, it is a crazy release for, not for maybe most people, but for people who like these games. This is like, I'm trying to find the right word. This is, if you went, say, maybe 5-6 years ago and showed someone, hey, this is the release schedule for Square Enix, you would call them a liar. You would straight up go, no, you're trying to give me false hope. You're not telling me the truth. There's no way in hell we get all of these games. A Valkyrie game. There's also the Valkyrie Profile Lenneth. I can't remember which Valkyrie game is getting a remaster just ahead of Valkyrie Elysium to sell it more. And they're just going, oh yeah, all that IP that people loved in the PS2 era. Yeah. I mean, Star Ocean has had games, but none of them have been well budgeted or well marketed. They kind of just existed in the ether. And now Square Enix fuck it. There's enough of you. There's enough of you fans. We'll make the games for you, and maybe you'll actually draw more people in if we actually talk about them or show them. They do weird stuff like dropping the Tactics Ogre Reborn announcement on just a random Thursday, which was either Thursday or Tuesday. Just no pomp or circumstance. Literally just, oh yeah, we've remade Tactics Ogre, the game that you can basically thank for Yoshi P existing as he is today, because that was the tactics genre was born by Yasumi Matsuno in Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre, and then went on to Final Fantasy Tactics, which they also have a remaster of that we know from the GeForce Now, which isn't on the release dates. So they have all of this and more somewhere in the back, and I'm just sitting this is basically for a subset of gamers paradise.
Yeah, so it's basically focusing on Japan and doing games from Japan well, which is something that's kind of backed up by what Matsuda said fairly recently, right? Saying, making games that are inspired by their own design methodologies, not aping those of others. Basically saying, if a Japanese developer tries to imitate a Western game, they can't make a good one. Was it Capcom that had that whole experience for a while?
Yeah, because Deep Down never made it to exist, and that was very much, hey, we're going to try the more kind of Western-y style of thing. And obviously they can do Western fantasy okay, because that's what they did with Dragon's Dogma. But Dragon's Dogma was medieval fantasy through a very Japanese lens because it was so inspired by Berserk, and that's kind of where all of the leading stuff comes from. Obviously Dark Souls is heavily inspired by Berserk, and that's where the Japanese idea of medieval fantasy comes. But when they just go, hey, we'll just do Western fantasy the way the Westerners think about it, then culturally they don't really have an idea what that's like.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was just what he said basically is if we try to make a Western game, the designs of the monsters, the visuals, the audios, they're all still Japanese, and players around the world know that is what makes Japanese games good. So it's really just going down to doubling down on the stuff that people around the world like about what they do. And that takes us to the business decisions, where the most recent earnings call also provided them one of their last opportunities to dunk on kind of on their Western holdings, because of course we know that they're selling Crystal Dynamics and Eidos to Embracer Group, which is fairly crazy. They did so for $300 million, which also was seen to be basically a bit of a bargain bin price.
Yeah, they just clearly went, no, we don't want this anymore. This isn't working for us. We're just throwing our money and time and effort into it. We'll just give it to someone else who knows what they're doing. And so far, based on what Embracer have said and based on what those studios have said, everyone just goes, thank fuck that's done with. Yeah. We can finally actually, because it was Eidos saying they want to go back to Deus Ex and they can now, and you're like, all right, cool. They're no longer been held hostage by Square in a way.
So apparently getting rid of those two large studios, very expensive to run and all of that was phase one. And that was driven, this is the insane thing that they said. concerns that the titles cannibalize sales of the rest of the group, and so it could improve capital efficiency. Now, this basically is the idea that the output of Eidos Montreal and Crystal Dynamics would take away from JRPGs?
If you show me one person who didn't buy... I'm trying to think of what game came around at the same time. If you show me one person who decided, am I going to buy the Final Fantasy VII remake on PC, or am I going to buy the Tomb Raider collection, and they like actively lined those up and just said Tomb Raider instead, I would assume you're actually just gaslighting me, because there's no way in hell no one made that specific decision, or how that would happen like en masse. I could maybe see it of Tomb Raider's too popular, it must be eaten into our, like, the sales we get better returns on because we, you know, have a more efficient time with our Japanese stuff. Maybe there's something there where, like, what they meant was, you know, it's more efficient to have the Japanese games sell. But if they actually believe that, then I don't know what they're smoking, but I definitely want some of it.
Yeah, it's weird. So phase 2 then is basically them reviewing their current holdings, right, in order to be flexible with their capital structure. And that basically means that some studios under Square Enix will remain 100% owned, but others may actually instead become joint ventures or be like open to an equity buy-in, that kind of thing. And around this time, they also split from Bulkhead Interactive. Bulkhead did Battalion 1944, which unfortunately didn't catch on. Basically a Call of Duty 2 spiritual successor, kind of trying to make that happen. That was done with Square Enix. Square Enix took a 20%, well, Square Enix Collective, I believe, whatever it is anyway, they took a 20% ownership in that studio. That's now all ended, and the game's not going to be coming to console, and they're basically releasing a completely free and like final version of the game on Steam. So it's a funny little situation. Now, of course, Square Enix Collective is still having some pretty damn good times right now with power washing.
Yeah, so I think that's the case where I think the Square Enix Collective will still continue, which is their indie publishing label. It's just they won't be getting into bed with studios like in the West like they did with Bulkhead. Because I think that must have been based off the Turing Test, which was a Square Enix Collective title. And they kind of went, oh, we'll buy 20% of you. This went okay, even though the Turing Test wasn't all that good. It was perfectly fine. But it just must just be going, fuck, why are we bothering with the West? Because especially when it comes to, you look at a lot of the games that are releasing, and quite a few of them aren't their own studios. They're studios they're partnered with, and they seem to have decent success with that because it was, I think it was Artadink was a studio that remastered the Nier Replicant, and that was something where that clearly worked pretty well for them overall. They were happy to trust them in that. Obviously, Nier Automata was platinum, so clearly they're like getting into that kind of, can we just have like joint ventures with these people and still make all the money from publishing stuff? And then, but then I imagine there's a little bit of them going, looking at Luminous Productions who are making Forspoken and going, this is so expensive, this isn't going to work. Why did we give them another game? Was it sunk cost fallacy? What are we doing with all of this? Like, because they're talking about capital efficiency. So they must be sitting thinking, we're spending a lot of money when we don't really need to. I think that must just be kind of it going forward.
Yeah, so the position they're in now, as pointed out here by analyst Dave Gibson, is they have 1.4 billion in cash. They have zero debt, which in one way means that they're in a perfect position to start investing things. As he says, you know, expand game investment, not sell down stakes in its studios. So that's what's kind of weird. They don't necessarily need to do some of what they're doing. It more seems like they're trying to recalibrate overall. I just guess like their overall position, double down on what they're perhaps better at. And then that's when it gets kind of interesting too, because the Eidos Montreal founder said that part of his understanding is that he heard rumors that Sony are really interested in Square Enix Tokyo, but not the rest. So basically he was saying Matsuda basically kind of went garage sale mode to get rid of, to get rid of the assets that Sony wouldn't actually want, which is quite weird. And this idea that Sony may want to do something there, that's been floating around. Like, people obviously know there's a very strong relationship with the Final Fantasy brand and Sony, but also rumors since May of this year from Jeff Grubb and Greg Miller that some of this stuff has been planned, like some sort of acquisition, and that if that acquisition happened, the thought is it would be a bit like the Bungie acquisition, where they're still very much free to just do their thing, but there's an expectation that they contribute to Sony's more broad live service plans. So
yeah, there was that weird thing where that was like reported by a Chinese site. I can't remember what it was called, and it was like, "Oh, Sony Interactive acquires Square Enix China division for $200 million," and it was like, "Oh, it's happening! They finally bought them." And then Daniel Ahmad was like, "This website's source is a Jeff Grubb rumor," but no one noticed that because it was in Chinese. Everyone just took it for granted because it was Square Enix China. But no, apparently that's like something. You could see how it happens, but it'd be very interesting for Square Enix to split themselves up. This all the motive lines up. Everything makes sense, but at the same time, I can't imagine them going, "Yeah, sure, we'll sell you all our games." Shit, what about our merchandising and music wings that are really tied in closely to our games? Shit, how do we work out that out? That'd be interesting though.
Yeah, so the rumors are weird. I guess there's some people who are seeing a lot of what they're doing as getting prepared to be acquired, and maybe there are other people who look at this and think they're just trying to reposition themselves to be less in the West, more in their home turf where they have quite a lot of proven strengths. Yeah, except their mobile wing, which never seems to get anything off the ground strongly enough, which is, I'm going to say that's a good thing, because I would hate for them to find success there and then double down on it. That would be a frustrating experience for people who like, hey, you get like 8 games in the next 6 months, enjoy. Yeah, and the other thing for like studios is, of course, Luminous. Yeah. Like they're making Forspoken. That's going to be the weird one, because Luminous was like a fully in-house built studio that they built around FF15 and all of like the incredible talent they have there with like graphic stuff. And then they just can't seem to get an actual good game out of it. And the whole point of Forspoken was, I can't remember the names of them, but prestigious Western writers, they got them on board to go, okay, we'll make a game that's like, hey, I think Amy Hennig is attached to that project. Gary Whitta, who used to be the editor of PC Gamer, he then I think turns writer. I believe he was involved in Rogue One and a decent few other film projects. And I forget the other person, but I think they're they're a writer for quite a long time as well. Yeah, which, I mean, certainly does make the recent Forspoken trailer that everybody's been laughing about feel weird. But sometimes, the ability of a marketing department to completely fuck the tone of something, like, we all know that can happen, and then writers often get frustrated about that. Yeah. So we can't exactly judge the whole game by that very embarrassing trailer, but it is undoubtedly a PR problem that they're going to have to grapple with. Yeah, we're gonna see. I think the proof of the pudding of Square Enix going fuck the entire West, except for the people over there who buy our games, who like them, because we like the audience. Maybe not the industry, or maybe not the game development side of things. It'll be how Forspoken is received, how well it's taken, and how quickly they dump that shit to like $20 and say, fucking do whatever. Just get rid of it. Sell as much as you can, make our money back. Tell Luminous to go fuck themselves and sell them to Sony or something. Sell all the talent away to Sony for graphics engineers, and then go back to, just, hey, we've got small studios that we're outsourcing our IP to. So I can't remember who's making Valkyrie Elysium, but that's another like literally Who studio that have only done like small games and like especially like IP kind of stuff. And you can tell when you look at the game, same with Harvestella in a sense, you look and go, oh, that is budget. But budget now doesn't really matter too much. Yeah, it's like, is it budget or is it just cost controlled for what it should be? Yeah, that's maybe the better term to use, is cost control. We're like, this doesn't look like Spider-Man, but it also doesn't look like Drakengard 3 or any of like the late stage PS3 era games that look like absolute dog shit. It's like they look good. They've got the right lighting, but you can tell they're not going too hard. You can tell they're cost controlled. So it's like, I think that might be kind of their play, and we'll see how that works. I feel like that's like the final resting point of like, they're at the end and they understand who they are as a publisher and go, okay, we've got loads of IP that people like. We've got loads of like basically unique game genres. Because even like the tactics stuff, the Western form of tactics is mostly like the XCOM style. And they're trying stuff new with the Deofield Chronicle. The Triangle Strategy was really, really well received on Switch. And that was kind of a little bit of a new take on old school kind of tactic stuff. They're going for Tactics Ogre. They're just going, why did we forsake our roots? Why did we forsake our roots to make Final Fantasy 15? That was fucking stupid. Let's never do that again. It's kind of interesting. I guess like FF15, it probably eventually did actually do quite well.
Oh,
like sales and financially, right? Or
it broke even day one or something like that. I think it sold millions day one.
So it's like, to be more clear, what you're more referring to is the legacy of 15.
Yeah, because after 13 and 15 in a row, the fans were there, but the overall like the legacy, the attitude, the culture was, man, what the Final Fantasy doesn't know what it is at all, and it's only 14 and 16. And some of the throwback stuff resurrecting that. Because even that with FF7 remake being full, oh no, we know what Final Fantasy is. Here it is, we've remade it. We can prove we haven't lost the touch. Which is very much, you start with the original, or with an existing idea and, take it further or whatever else. Same with what they're probably doing with Final Fantasy 9. Because Remaster there was leaked in the GeForce Now stuff, but hasn't made an appearance. So it's very much like they are fully going, we know what we're doing. So the thing is, the reason I even wanted to talk about this in the first place is because it's so, interesting to have watched video games and publishers and developers not have a clue what they're doing for years and just, experiment and try new things. But they never found, a resting point of, we found, the track and the marathon pace we like, that we can just sit in our business hole and do our business things without doing crazy shit or trying to reinvent the wheel every now and again. And it's I'd love to see what this looks like for a Ubisoft, wherever what happens whenever they get out of their modern maturity phase. Because obviously things had settled a little bit in the PS2 era, and everyone was happy pumping out legacy titles. Well, there weren't legacy titles at the time. What am I talking about? But pumping out games that were hey, here's franchise entry 5. It's slightly better than franchise entry 4. And everyone went, it's getting a bit old, but I'll take it. And I was kind of happy with that kind of little bit of creative freedom within a wheelhouse. But it was all just, here's some pretty good games. Here's some pretty good games. They cost a little bit much maybe, but it'll be fine. And now we're in this realm of massive, just, we'll try live services. We'll try to put multiplayer and everything. Single player games are dead, say EA. Single player games are lifeblood, say EA the next week. Because they haven't a clue what they're talking about. And they haven't really found that angle. So it's I'd love to see, especially with Embracer there. And they're just hello. We do AA.
We're everything.
Yeah, we do everything and it's all AA and it'll be fine. Let's not talk about Asper Media. Let's not talk about that at all. Whoops. That's we fucked that up a little bit. But everything else is just here's whatever.
We didn't talk about that one on the channel, but
yeah,
KOTOR remake cancelled. Ouch.
Yeah,
big ouch.
Well, it's indefinitely delayed, not cancelled.
Sorry, yes.
But with them losing creative director and director, I think it might be a little bit cancelled.
It's screwed.
Yeah, but no, that's the point. Is just Square Enix have found their footing. Hopefully, it works for them, because
now they have no debt, just shy of $1.5 billion in cash.
Yeah, and
so they're ready to go.
Yeah, and they're going to have a lot more in cash after they release these games, because they're at least going to take $600-700 from me over the next year, including the FF14 subscription. Bastards. But yeah, and that's the thing. I'll be happy to give it to them. You wouldn't imagine that of any other publisher, would you? You would imagine money given. You're holding on to your wallet. Only take a wee bit. Hang, got to set spending limits here. Whereas whenever they just release games you want, people go, there you go, there's your money. I've yet to play Voice of Cards, but that's Yoko Taro's I'm making a card game now. I was you made Nier Automata, Save Platinum Games, and Square Enix, do whatever you want. And that's the kind of shit that just works
Yeah, so there you go. Square Enix, maybe they have a little bit of a different plan. And I guess if you, like me, have just been in the corner here thinking, I wanted Deus Ex all along, maybe we'll actually have, seemingly an actual chance of that happening, which would be pretty sweet. I mean, even with how they've treated Gothic, Embracer and Co., they seem to be pretty much up for shit. I know that's not a very analytical way of putting it, but you know what I mean. Anyway, look, I might get more Deus Ex. You're going to get a whole bunch more of what you like. Yep. Seemingly everyone's happy because maybe Square Enix were a bit of a square peg round hole situation with this bizarre period of time where they moved into the West. They weren't really doing the West right. Every time a big game from their Western divisions came out, they talked about how they were really disappointed about it. Avengers, that ends up being a big money pit. There's Super Bunny Hops reporting into Square Enix wanting to make everything a live service, somehow apparently even including Just Cause 3, and everything just becomes weird. The Hitman franchise becomes weird. IO Interactive, I mean, that's another example, right? They're free now. So it just seems like, things were not in alignment, and now maybe things will be in alignment, and that's good for everyone.
Yeah, basically, Square Enix have stopped fucking around with what they shouldn't have been at any point. So they're happy, and everyone they were fucking around with is now also happy. But that's the thing where, like, I try to connect it to publisher maturity, and it's just, yeah, you know, it's when you're young and trying to make crazy decisions, and you kind of fuck everything up a little bit, but then you find your groove and go, oh no, this is where everyone was happy all along.
Yeah, it seems like they've just kind of thought, all right, let's cut the silly shit and do what we do well. So overall, it's good news. Let us know what you think. See you next time.